Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Ironside Take30 for today, May 6th. We're going to run through this pretty quickly. We got a lot to cover. We want to make sure we get to a good demonstration and get to the Q&A session at the end. We're going to run quick through an Ironside and Trifacta background. We're going to talk about what data wrangling is, what its purpose, what its definition is, and do a demonstration and Q&A. This is the first of the May sessions. We have 3 more to go. If you are interested, please make sure you get registered for everything and spread the word too. Next week, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into data wrangling, cover some of the things that or actually expand on some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Just to start off, a quick introduction on Ironside. At Ironside, we view every interaction with our customers through the lens of business outcomes. We're focused on solutions, and we look for tools to get the client to where they need quickly, but with a long-term solution in mind. And to that end, we have a lot of great partnerships right now. But one of our newest and most exciting partnerships is with Trifacta. You see them in the middle there, who fills a really nice role in our toolbox, and we'll come back to that in a bit. At Ironside, we run full data lifecycle. From quick checkups to long-term engagements, we might do one or more of these little slices of pie, or maybe even just sometimes an ingredient, maybe the whole thing. For some people, we simply do upgrades, might take a few days, and for others, we might do a full build. I just came off of a 2-year engagement that was just the design, build, and deploy part of this pie. My name is Reinhardt. I've been with Ironside now for about 2.5 years. I've been in IT for 25 and data warehousing for about 20. I've run the gamut of data roles, analyst, ETL, developer, architect, management even. So anything from telecommunications to energy to finance. And I've been consulting for the past 7 years. And on with me right now is Vijay from Trifacta. Vijay, could you jump on and do a quick bio yourself?
Yeah, hi, this is Vijay Balasubrahmanyam. I'm a partner solutions architect at Trifacta. I've been with Trifacta for about 2.5 years. I've been in the data analytics space throughout my career, having done a number of consulting roles as well as worked with large banks and most recently with Trifacta.
Thank you, Vijay. So let's jump right into it. What is data wrangling? So looking up definitions, I figured I'd go right to the source of all good information, Wikipedia. And it shows that data wrangling is just data transformation from a raw state to a usable, consumable state. Something that has some sort of value for analytics or other business purposes. Sounds kind of simple, but isn't necessarily simple because there's a lot of moving parts involved. And we've been doing data wrangling for years, from working on items on paper, then using technology when things got too hard to work on paper. And a lot of times we had to rely on data scientists and mathematicians to get a data wrangle. And a lot of times the needs outpace the ability of the general wrangler. Also, extra credit, if you know who this brilliant mind is, I got a picture on it right now. Send it in the chat. We'll give you a shout out in the Q&A. But right now, the most used tool for general data wrangling, you probably think of it in your head. Yeah, Excel. Moving columns, formatting data, doing calculations, or the impressive to your cube neighbor VLOOKUP. But the problem is it's inconsistent, and you're relying on dangerous knowledge of employees who might not be that great at it. So data for everyone is unfortunately a problem. You have data coming from disparate sources. You have inconsistently presented pieces. Data might be on a different level that's needed. We don't know if people are performing calculations properly. Now, if you have a traditional ETL, it kind of helps for some of those problems, but that can take too long to get that quick insight. And you have to have very, very solid business needs to lock down something like ETL. And a lot of people have been looking for more sort of quicker self-serve analytics And a lot of times they don't have enough people to work that workload. These are kind of universal problems. And nobody's alone in this. It's a huge part of any project. And you can see here, the study shows that 80% of the project can be data preparation. So let's just take a quick break. Debbie, can you put up the poll? I think you've got a poll ready. We'll do this poll as I go through the rest of the presentation, and we can see if we get our answers and where everybody lies. Let's just run through kind of what the current wrangling process is for most people who don't have a tool like Wrangler, Excel, or some people have even been using some other tools. But just thinking about Excel, thinking about the general user, the business will discover a need, and they'll go out and they'll get the data source files. They'll do some modification instructors. They might drop some items. They might move columns around. They'll do their best to clean data. They'll enrich it with calculations and try to work on some simple business rules. Probably can't get too complex. And then, yeah, you can email it to people. You can use it for yourself. You can email it to people. But that's not necessarily a repeatable process. It's not a conformed process. You could have two different people in different departments of the same departments doing the same thing and coming up with different results. So a lot of people move then to more of a traditional ETL process, which is repeatable, it's validatable. Everyone will be using the same thing, but it can take months to answer a typical question. And by the time that answer comes, that question may be irrelevant. So much has to happen between IT and the business in each step. And sometimes, and the business needs have to be very clear and locked down, and sometimes that's difficult to get to. So if we bring Wrangler in, and that's the part in the gray box here, now we can discover a need and quickly develop and test solutions. You could run the whole cycle, maybe stop after each step and have the business review pieces. But ultimately, what you get is an iterative, quick-to-market solution. The business can be experimental, and because they're actually given control of that gray box, not IT. So you can discover a need, run out something quick, have it in front of the business, have it in front of yourself, and kind of test out your own solution, rather than going through tons of work with ETL. But we're not saying that ETL is necessarily out of the picture. What you end up with if using traditional ETL and something like Wrangler is something we call the bimodal model, where the lockdown regulated data warehouse can still do a lot of the day-to-day heavy lifting, but Wrangler can come in and help provide quick access to good usable data much faster. So you get the benefit of both the traditional warehouse and quick hit analytics. It's a great system. It's something that we definitely push for here at Ironside. So BJ, I'm going to hand it over to you quickly, let you do a presentation, a quick demonstration of Wrangler, and we'll come back and kind of recap and do our Q&A.
Getting set up, I just wanted to tell everyone from the poll perspective, 50% are doing a lot with manual tools, and the other 50% were using some wrangling tools, half of them some bit and half of them a lot.
Okay, so I wanted to show you a real quick, very quick demo of the Trifacta application. Just want to introduce a couple of concepts here. So what we're doing is data wrangling, and in this particular case, we are producing a marketing analytics dashboard. So the end result of what we are looking for is a Tableau dashboard that looks something like this. So it's got some metrics like profit by state, order value by year, and sales by source. Now, in order to produce this, we need to actually combine data from disparate data sources. So those might come from advertising clickstream data that's coming in this case in an S3 bucket in a CSV file. I also have some sales data which originated from a relational database. So the nice thing is you can mix and match data sources. There is a whole list of data sources that we support, and those are listed here as well as on the Trifacta website. So that's typically the first step in what we're creating here is a flow which consists of data sources, and tied to those data sources are recipes. So I can click on edit recipe to go into the advertising clickstream recipe. Now, notice that when this comes up, it shows in a very familiar Excel-like view of the data where you can browse the rows and columns of your data. You also get some cues in terms of data quality and data profile right out of the box. So for example, you can see that you can look at the various discovered data types for event time, which is a date time. There are some integers in here, some strings in here. It's also showing me a data quality bar, which is highlighting some issues. So I can click on this, and it will actually highlight those relevant rows. And it's also offering suggestions on how to clean up this data. And we'll come back to this in just a moment. You can also see there is a data profile in terms of the value distribution for each and every column. I can drill into this. And if I go into column details, there is a much more detailed profile that you get that breaks down the value distributions by various slices, such as month and day of the month and hour and so on. I can also use this profile to actually get some suggestions to do the cleanup. So for example, I noticed that there are some error timed out instead of actual dates. And as soon as I click on that, I get a suggestion. And these suggestions are driven by machine learning that's built into Trifacta. I'm going to pick, in this case, the suggestion to delete these rows. Now, when I add this step, it basically becomes a step in my recipe that is a repeatable step that gets applied every time I run any data through this recipe. Notice that my profile has immediately updated. My error timeout are gone. I can see some improvement in my data quality bar. The next thing I'm going to do is switch over to the patterns tab. And here, what this is allowing me to do is discovering some pattern differences in the date values in this event time field. It turns out that in most cases, I have 2-digit months, but in some cases, I have month abbreviations, such as November being spelled out like this. Not only can you discover these patterns, you can select the one that you want, and you get suggestions to actually convert all of the event times into the pattern that you just selected. So simply by a click of a button, I can add this as a recipe step. It will immediately apply the necessary pattern conversion logic. And now you can see that all my data has been brought into the same pattern, and my data quality bar is now showing a solid green. So with just like that, with a couple of clicks, we have been able to clean up all the data quality issues in this particular event time field. You can do other interesting things using this, using the data profiling and automatic discovery feature. I'm going to just show one more example, which is basically pulling out the source of the advertising clickstream from this URL. Now, we have automatically discovered that this is a URL. If I simply click on this, notice that I get suggestions from the tool, again, which are driven by AI. And I can choose an option to pull out the domain name, which is one of the attributes I want to put on my dashboard. So I can add this as a recipe step. And now I can proceed to rename this. And I can call this as source. So this becomes one of the data elements that I can finally put on my dashboard. So I'll stop at this point in the interest of time. Hopefully this has given you a glimpse of what's possible with this tool, the ease of use and the interactivity of the platform. You've also built out this repeatable recipe that can be applied over and over again, not only to this kind of data set, but also large or humongous data sets. Using the power of Spark, you can actually scale this out to gigabytes, terabytes, or even petabytes of data. So with that, I'll turn it back to Dean to carry on.
Thank you, Vijay. Yeah, and that's just a tiny little scratch on what this tool can do and how valuable it is. So if you guys have any questions, please make sure you throw something up there. With something like Data Wrangler, with Trifacta Wrangler. we can now see data as a solution. We've got a way to join multiple sources. This is all on our own desktop. We're not relying on IT to do it. We have consistency across sources. We can get faster answers to questions. It kind of democratizes the business knowledge while keeping it controlled and consistent, and enables that fast bimodal analytics for those with ETL systems, or maybe get some businesses into the analytics market who feel they weren't big enough for something traditional. You can take your tough to deal with data and actually make it an asset, which it truly is. So I think we can jump into the Q&A session right now. I don't know if we have any questions queued up.
Hey, this is Jeff.
I know we went through this very quickly, but go ahead, Jeff.
We do have some questions, so I'll lead with them, and whoever wants to answer can answer. And if people have more, they can type them into the chat, and we can take it from there. So the first question is, does Trifacta take the place of a BI reporting tool?
So Trifacta is primarily a data wrangling tool. You can think of it as the layer that prepares the data for a BI reporting tool. So even though we saw that there is rich profiling that's built into the tool, the purpose of that profile is actually to help the user understand any potential issues with their data, pretty dashboard to present to end users. So hopefully that answers the question. So really we are preparing data and doing all the data manipulation needed ahead of time, so that when it comes time for BI reporting, you can then pass it off to a BI tool in order to actually produce a report.
The next question is about data volumes. So this user has a fairly large data set. How does Trifacta handle doing this kind of thing to a lot of data?
Great question. So we actually provide a couple of options in terms of how to handle different scales of data. There is actually a single server based Photon engine that we offer, which actually gives you very quick response times for small sets of data. So let's say you have like just some spreadsheets or files that are typically under a gigabyte. You can just use Photon as the execution engine. You will get back a result in a few seconds. For larger data sets, if you're talking about over a gigabyte or even in the terabyte or petabyte scale, that's still no problem. You can hand off the data to this and select Spark as your execution engine. At that point, what Trifacta does is it compiles down the data transformation flow into a Spark job, and it will basically submit it to the Spark cluster, which then can scale it out to almost unlimited scales. So, and all of that is done in a very transparent way, so that the user doesn't really have to worry about the details of what's happening with. So, for example, you don't have to write any Spark code. You just basically run the recipe, and Trifacta handles everything behind the scenes for you.
Great, thanks again. The next question we have is, what's the difference between this and other data wrangling tools in the market?
That's a great question. So Trifacta differentiates itself in a few ways. So first of all, it's ease of use, right? So as you saw, the user interface is extremely friendly and very approachable to someone who has worked in spreadsheets. And we find that many of the other tools out in the market don't do as good a job in terms of the ease of use. So that's one thing. The other key differentiating factor is our architecture. So we are a cloud native architecture. Depending on which cloud platform you're executing this on, we actually leverage a lot of the native functionality as well as the security mechanisms that underlie those platforms. So when it comes to architecture and scalability, reliability and things like that, Trifacta typically tends to score much higher than our competition because of the strength of our architecture.
The next question, what's the cost structure?
So the cost structure, so in terms of a Trifacta application, so we typically license it based on number of users. So typically you would provision a Trifacta instance, and there is a platform fee associated with the instance itself. And then based on the number of users, you would pay a license model. So it's an annual license that you subscribe to.
So one of the common problems with, sort of old school data wrangling with Excel and the like is that you often get different people or different departments, producing the same or similar metrics. And of course, they'll think it's the same metric, but the calculations are slightly different, so reports never add up. How do you make sure with a tool like this that people aren't doing that?
That's a great question. And that is something that many of our customers run into, and one of the main reasons why Trifacta is brought on, which is the level of transparency it provides into the actual logic that is happening during the data wrangling process, right? So as you saw during the demo, we capture a very transparent recipe of steps. So anyone without having deep technical knowledge or being able to interpret code can easily at a glance see what logic is embedded within each recipe. In addition to that, we also have audit logging capabilities. So every change that happens to a recipe actually gets logged. So you can go back and look at the detailed history of not only what the recipe steps are, but who made changes to them and when. So there are timestamps attached to each of those changes. So there is a very high degree of transparency, and especially this becomes very important in some industries which have like strict regulatory requirements. So for example, banking, it's an industry that I'm quite familiar with. So oftentimes banks have to show to their regulators how a certain value on a financial report was produced. And in order to actually demonstrate that, you can go back and show even to your regulators what steps you have in your recipe, what is the exact logic, as well as who's making changes and how it has evolved over time.
Okay, and so from what you said, multiple people can use and edit and see a given recipe as opposed to being stuck on one user's machine.
That is correct. So the recipes are basically shared objects. So each user can create their own recipes and flows. And within a user, you can reuse those things. You can make copies of recipes. So that's one level of reuse. Another level of reuse is between users. So one user can actually create a flow with certain logic and essentially share that flow with their colleagues. And that sharing can be done in a couple of ways. You can either send your colleague a copy of your flow, which basically creates an independent copy of that object, or you can actually collaborate in a Google Docs style collaboration where multiple users can simultaneously edit the same flow. And Trifacta will actually keep track of who's making what change and when. So all those things are managed by the application transparently.
Okay.
Can I jump in with one of my own questions?
Of course.
One of the things that I think is setting Wrangler apart, and almost feels like a gimme in the application, is the AI. Is that AI shared across the enterprise, or is that something that it learns from the person who's using it at that station, that login, or is this something that's applied across the entire application?
That's a great question. So the answer is actually all of the above. So there are multiple ways in which the Trifacta platform learns from user interactions and basically responds to that and gets smarter over time, right? So the simplest way, is for an individual user who's interacting with the application, the application kind of knows what are the typical queries or typical suggestions that the user tends to pick, and those will get prioritized over time. So as you saw in the recipe window, you're getting multiple suggestions. Now the ordering of that suggestions will respond to which ones actually get selected more often. So that will reflect your individual preferences. Now at the platform level, there are again some learnings that happen. And this is something that takes into account the aggregate interactions of multiple users of Trifacta all around the world. So what happens is we do have the Trifacta Wrangler product available as a free Wrangler out on the web. So the data that we collect from that, we anonymize that, and we use some of that information to train our machine learning models, which are basically driving some of these suggestions. So that algorithm constantly gets better as we get more data collected out from the field. And anytime we do a version upgrade, all that intelligence get passed down to your instance of Trifacta. So that's something that, when each time we upgrade the software, which is once every quarter or so, you will get a fresh batch of AI improvements that will automatically you can start benefiting from.
Thank you. The next question we have, we talked a little bit about in one of Dean's slides, the bimodal model. Can you explain the bimodal model?
If you think about traditional ETL, you have your source system, you have, it could be an ODS or it just could be a staging area. You work with your traditional ETL and you create an enterprise data mart. It's good for lockdown reports that you want to make sure are approved before they go out. They could be repeating reports that, again, you need to make sure are fully consistent. The only problem with that is it can be a long time to get that answer out there. And a lot of times the question is asked, the answer finally comes 4 months later and no one's asking the question anymore. So with something like Data Wrangler, you can see the interoperability of this here. Wrangler can pull from the ODS or can pull directly from the source systems. It can feed the traditional ETL, so things that you actually build within Wrangler to modify data or conform it or enrich it can actually go into the enterprise data mart, but it also goes directly to self-serve analytics. So you can have a question and honestly, in 15, 20 minutes, you can have your answer. And you can use that then you send that to your ETL team and say, here's how you do your work. Engagements. I'm starting to use Wrangler now to just do a quick data profile as soon as I see data, so I can give people an idea of what we're looking at. And that's just the simple free downloaded piece. It's extremely valuable for that. But then once you step it up, it can actually be part of a much larger system that can have your traditional ETL, but then a much faster to market answers that come through self-serve analytics. And self-serve is absolutely where it's at right now. And this is a fantastic tool for that. Okay, did anyone get the name of that data scientist, by the way?
They didn't put it in the chat, so no.
It's Catherine Johnson. Catherine Johnson, she was a NASA data scientist, mathematician. Watch Hidden Figures if you haven't already. So we'll wrap that up for this week. You see next week, May 13th, we're going to go a little bit more in depth into data wrangling. I definitely try to spread the word and get some more people at your organization. Get your friends jumping on these Take30s. They're very, very valuable. You guys have anything else?
Nope, it's a wrap. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.